Have you ever gotten a sudden, uncomfortable feeling just out of nowhere? A feeling that's hard to place, but it's somewhere between intuition and instinct. We might also call it a gut feeling. One time I had something that I think could be described as that gut feeling. There's this prickly feeling when I was out in the woods. There was this strong lizard brain message to get out of there as quickly as possible and back to my car. I'm not going to be telling that story today, but instead, I'm going to be talking about another, one that has to do with premonitions. Premonition is like that intuition feeling, but boosted up to full power. And it is so much stronger because it actually allows you to visualize an event before it happens in, say, like a dream, or even kind of just having a flash of this visualization of an event that's happening maybe miles and miles away. Or if you are a viewer outside the US, you might say kilometers and kilometers away. But far away, and not something that you would be able to see on like a live stream or a video or some other technological way of witnessing the event, but instead you just kind of have it flash in your mind, a visualization. And that's what we call a premonition. In history, there are many, many examples of premonitions happening. And there likely were even more that just weren't recorded because they happened to a person who wasn't rich or famous, and maybe didn't have to do with a person who was rich or famous. Just regular people living their day-to-day lives who didn't have social media or another way to let other people know about odd experiences. So this visualization of future events probably happened to more people than we know. Today, when I was researching for this video, I found an example that I want to cover that happened to Mark Twain. This name might be familiar to you, but Mark Twain was an American author and orator, which is just a fancy name to describe someone who gives speeches, and a very talented human being. Here's one of his quotes: "Always obey your parents when they are present." He has a bunch of fun quotes. Another one is that I found: "It is more satisfactory to be pretty than right." And that one kind of speaks to me. So definitely a man of many talents, definitely a man with deep thoughts. But this story that I'm going to tell happened before he was a rich and famous man, before he was an author, before he was an orator. He had just recently gotten his dream job from when he was a young boy, which was steamboat captain. This was a time in history before highways and airplanes, and steamboats were a way that people traveled in the Midwest United States during that time period. And it was kind of ingenious because the Mississippi River and all of its tributaries, the waterways created a network that was very similar to roads or highways, and was a really efficient way of getting around. And Mark, being a good older brother and talented guy, had been able to get a job on a steamboat for his younger brother, Henry. The job he had gotten him was unpaid, but if he did good work, Henry could expect to be promoted and maybe even become a steamboat captain like his older brother sometime in the future. This was not to be the future, however, which leads us to the premonition portion of our story.
In the morning, when I awoke, I had been dreaming, and the dream was so vivid, so like reality, that it deceived me, and I thought it was real. In the dream I had seen Henry a corpse. He lay in a metallic burial case. He was dressed in a suit of my clothing, and on his breast lay a great bouquet of flowers, mainly white roses, with a red rose in the center. The casket stood upon a couple of chairs. I dressed, and moved toward that door, thinking I would go in there and look at it, but I changed my mind. I thought I could not yet bear to meet my mother. I thought I would wait a while and make some preparation for that ordeal. The house was in Locust Street, a little above 13th, and I walked to 14th, and to the middle of the block beyond. Before it suddenly flashed upon me that there was nothing real about this, it was only a dream. I can still feel something of the grateful upheaval of joy of that moment, and I can also still feel the remnant of doubt, the suspicion that maybe it was real, after all. I returned to the house almost on a run, flew up the stairs 2 or 3 steps at a jump, and rushed into that sitting room, and was made glad again, for there was no casket there. The date of my memorable dream was about the beginning of May, 1858. It was a remarkable dream, and I had been telling it several times every year for more than 15 years, and now I was telling it again, here in the club.
So, Mr. Twain has a hyper-realistic dream about seeing his brother in a coffin. Metal coffin. Metal caskets were not very common for people to be buried in at this time. And with a bouquet of roses. So he sees this metal coffin and the roses. Then he walks around outside on the streets. And he finally realized as he's walking that it was only a dream, that it wasn't real. So this dream was very, very vivid for him. And then he hurried back to the house to convince himself it was all a dream. And he was very, very, very relieved about this. But that was not the end of the story about Mark and his brother Henry, sadly. Just a few weeks after Mark had this dream, his brother would die. I did not include the information about his death in the direct quotes from Mark Twain's Autobiography I have in the video, but Henry died in a tragic way. He died while working the job his older brother had gotten him. This was a time before OSHA or work safety protections, and the boiler on the ship, the part of the steamboat that created the hot water under pressure, exploded, and young Henry was badly, badly injured, and he later died from the horrible injuries. Mark Twain would later talk about the time he saw his brother's corpse.
I think he died about dawn, I don't remember as to that. He was carried to the dead room, and I went away for a while to a citizen's house and slept off some of my accumulated fatigue, and meantime something was happening. The coffins provided for the dead were of unpainted white pine, but in this instance some of the ladies of Memphis had made up a fund of $60 and bought a metallic case. And he was dressed in a suit of my clothing. He had borrowed it without my knowledge during our last sojourn in St. Louis. And I recognized instantly that my dream of several weeks before was here exactly reproduced, so far as these details went, and I think I missed one detail. But that one was immediately supplied, for just then an elderly lady entered the place with a large bouquet consisting mainly of white roses, and in the center of it was a red rose. And she laid it on his breast.
After he died, Mark eventually saw him laying in the metal coffin with the bouquet of roses, just like in his dream from weeks before. Now, I'm sure this turn of events was very traumatic for Mark at the time, not only because of his young brother dying, but also because of his dream, his premonition. He said in the autobiography he had told the story of this event many times, but never had it published, even though Mark was a famous author, because he did not want to upset his mother. Understandable. I could see this story being upsetting for her. Man, what a good son. Mark Twain, talented guy, good brother, and son. In fact, the account of his dream was not published until long after Mr. Mark Twain's death. In his lifetime, though, he did become an early member of the Society for Psychical Research. So this is not not psychological research, but psychical. So not the therapy one, but, the mind reading crystal ball one. I think it likely his premonition may have been his reason for joining the society. So now let's talk about the possible explanations for this premonition and for this dream. First one that comes to mind, of course, is that Mark is lying and that he just made this up. I don't think this is likely. I don't think this is at all what happened and I'll tell you why. He did not publicize the story about his dream while he was alive, even though he was a famous author and could make money from telling the story by publishing a book or, charging to speak about it or something like that. But he did not do any of those things. Also, this obviously was a painful event for his family. And through his actions that we've seen, he cared about their feelings. Why would he lie about having this dream that likely would upset them? So that also doesn't make sense, saying that he just lied about this. Also, he did not want his story widely known and only had it in his autobiography published after he died. So he did not make money from it. So because of all these reasons, I do not believe that Mark is lying about having this dream. Second explanation is he is misremembering. I think this is possible. He may have misremembered the order of events, and maybe he had the dream after his brother died. So maybe his brother died, and then he had this very vivid dream because it was so traumatic and painful having his brother die like that. However, he seems to recall a lot of details that make this hard to believe that he is misremembering this, because he recalls the friend that he stayed at. I didn't include that in the quote, but in the autobiography, he knows the friend's name. He also knows what street he was walking on when he woke up and was walking around outside. He recalls the street names. And as well, he also remembers the date of his dream, like the general date. And I did include that quote. So I don't think that he's misremembering the order. Another thing he might have misremembered, though, is that maybe he misremembered the details about the coffin, maybe the details about him wearing his clothes, the details about the bouquet. So maybe the details were not as accurate as he recalls them. And I think this is possible. There's no way to know for sure all of these details, whether they were true or not, because, of course, there's no pictures of this happening, no photographs of this happening. So there's no way to know for sure about that. So it is possible that maybe he's misremembering some of the more specific details about the coffin and the clothes and all that. Even though this is possible, it still doesn't take away the fact that the important part of the dream, which was having to do with his brother, came true. So, but yes, this one is possible that he is misremembering some of the details. The third option, of course, is that he had the dream, he had the premonition, and then the events occurred as he had dreamed them, making this a real premonition, a real unexplained phenomena. This explanation is just that this event occurred. So something that could back this part up is that Mark Twain did join the Society of Psychical Research, which seems to back up that he at least believed sincerely that it did happen to him, that he did have this dream. And let's not forget that these types of foretellings such as having a vision about something that is going to occur or may occur in the future, having these kind of visions is not a new thing in history, as I covered earlier on. After a certain point, with so many people having stories like this, at some point, you have to say that all these people all having these kind of visions or dreams or foretelling or foreshadowing has to be real, right? Like after many, many accounts of this. Like, how do you discredit all of them when all these people seem to have similar experiences, right? Maybe? I'm not sure, but what do you think? Mark Twain is an interesting guy with a lot of accomplishments. Do you think his dream was real? If not, what do you think happened? What is the explanation? Let me know in the comments. And maybe I'll cover more about Mark Twain or other mysteries of history in the future. See you then. Later, my gators.